Buena tarde a todos, mucho gusto. Mi nombre es Daniel Ruiz, soy estudiante de segundo año de la Escuela de Cine y pues primero que todo muchas gracias por asistir a este evento. Em, ahora tenemos un cineforo, ¿verdad? Em, Vamos a tener la oportunidad de ver esta película que se llama Paris Memories, que fue estrenada en el 2022. También tenemos como invitado especial a Marc Eliot, que él nos dará un análisis sobre esta película y luego de verla vamos a poder hacerle preguntas y ustedes también van a poder participar. Ahorita le paso el micrófono a Javi para que nos hable un poco más sobre quién es Marc Eliot.
Gracias, Dani. Voy a leer en inglés, ¿verdad? La biografía de Mark Eliot para que la tenga más completa. Entonces, Mark Eliot is a best-selling author and film historian from the USA. He is an award-winning author of 27 books, several of which have appeared on the New York Times bestseller list. They include biographies of Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, Clint Eastwood, Walt Disney, the Eagles, and Merle Haggard. He is graduate. He's a graduate from New York's High School of Performing Arts, and he holds an MFA from Columbia University, where he completed his PhD work in film history and criticism, where he was mentored by the legendary Andrew Saris, the father of American artistic film criticism. He has written on film and music for several publications, including California Magazine, where he was the popular culture editor, the LA Weekly, Cinema, The Village Voice, and several others. He is also the resident film curator at the Riverfront Museum in Peoria, Illinois, where he originated the popular series Mark Eliot's Art of Film. Mark Eliot is visiting the film school where he is teaching World of Cinema documentary filmmaking. So we will proceed to watch the film.
Tout s'est effacé de ma mémoire. Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé après?
Le matin, très tôt, j'ai reçu un appel de l'hôpital. Tu avais été transporté, tu étais blessé. Je suis venu te voir. Je suis passé dans la rue du restaurant. Il y avait des fleurs et plein de dessins d'enfants. C'était comme un couloir dans lequel les gens défilaient.
Est-ce que vous pouvez vous asseoir ailleurs? C'est là où mes parents étaient assis.
Vous vous souvenez de moi?
Non.
Qu'est-ce que vous faites ici, vous? Vous vous êtes précipité dans les toilettes au premier coup de feu, et vous n'avez pas ouvert.
J'ai pas fait ça. Il paraît que vous vous souvenez de tout ce qui s'est passé.
Pourquoi vous voulez vous souvenir?
J'aimerais bien retourner au musée où ils ont été. Pour la dernière chose qu'ils ont vue. J'aurais l'impression de leur dire au revoir.
Faut qu'on fasse ce qu'on aurait dû faire ce soir-là.
Quoi? Vincent,
Allez,
Qu'est-ce que tu fais?
allez, ça a assez duré, là. J'aurais préféré y être dans ce putain d'attente.
Je suis pas sûr que de te souvenir, ça puisse t'aider.
avant, je me demandais jamais si j'étais heureuse. Maintenant, oui.
This is the kind of film that I think is so important for film students to see. It's too often we get lost in the classical films and we kind of forget that the world of film doesn't revolve around Hollywood, that there's another world out there of filmmaking. Not a spider, not an ape man, not a Godzilla in this film. It's a film made for human beings. First of all, it's a film made by a woman. I hope you're aware of that. Alice Winocourt, who she's been around about 20 years in French cinema, and she's made 10 films. Each film is as wonderful and complete and self-contained as this film. As she's gone along, this is 2022. It was a finalist for the French Oscars. She won. The actress, Virginie Efira, won the Best Actress right here, and deservedly so. What she does in this film is so visual. This is the first time I've seen it with Spanish subtitles. And I'm not sure how accurate those subtitles were, or if you even need them in this film. This is a film that you need to watch, not listen to, and not really think too much about. You need to watch this film and have this event come over you, the event of the film. Now, one of the really smart things that Winokur does is not to make this into a police film. Who are these terrorists? Let's go after them. We're going to get them every last. There's none of that in the film. And also, if you rewatch it, and I highly recommend you do rewatch it at some point when you can, the attack is very brief, and you really don't see too much of it. You hear it, you hear the gunshots. What Alice Winokur does is she focuses on the reactions, on the faces of these people. So when you see her, you see Virginie cringing, afraid for her life underneath that table. That's all you need to see. That's really all you need. And then that hand that comes out to grab her, that dark hand. The things that, the moments in this film that are so extraordinary are mostly all visual. For example, I can't remember when I've seen a film so evocative as when they are cleaning up the monument and she's watching from that, wherever she is, the hotel or the hospital, and they're just brushing away the past. They're just removing any sense of lasting impact on everybody else's life. They're just sweeping it away. And it's brutal. It's a brutal thing to watch, and it's a brutal thing to experience as an audience and as the character. The hands that go through this film, there is a need to connect and to redeem. The two things that are going on in this film. She needs to make that connection. That's the real detective story in the film, is her trying to find who this person was who reached out for her. And then when she is making love with the fellow who broken up leg, it's not a very erotic scene, and it's not meant to be. It's all about hands. It's those hands where they begin to connect to each other. They're not those hands, but they're one of the people who've experienced what she did. The other thing I like in the film, in terms of how you tell this story, it's also, I think, one of the weakest parts of the film, but you can see why she did it. The husband was unfaithful. We picked up on that, right? And he left her alone that night for her to go through this nightmare by herself. The unfaithfulness is handled so beautifully. It's a sentence and a shot of her face, and you see everything you need to know about their marriage and about his unfaithfulness. That is an economy of confidence, of filmmaking, where you don't have to spell everything out. The reason I say it's one of the weaker things, because it allows for her to then have this meeting with the fellow with the leg, and not be, and have it not turned into, oh, she's unfaithful, she walks away. So as a screenwriter, you have to set that up somehow. And by the way, Alice Winokur also wrote this film. So she wrote it and directed it And she conferred a lot with Virginie on how to put this story together. That train ride, remember this, the metro ride? This is one of the most astonishing sequences in this film because very quickly, depending upon how strongly you've been watching this film, there are all the victims from the blast, from the attack. And as she's riding the train, and again, cinematically, this is so powerful with nothing said. She gets off the train. She is not going to go gently into that good night by conflicts. She, that train is taking the victims to another life. Their lives are over. She gets off that train. And that is so powerful to me to see her resisting. No, this is not going to be my fate. But the focus for her in life comes, it all dwindles, but not reduces, but it economizes to finding this guy, the Senegalese fellow. She has to be able to put something back together. And so she rather beautifully tracks him down. Again, not without all the detective stuff and all that nonsense that you see in these kind of films. It's very, very economical. She meets the woman, she gains her trust. The woman tells her where he is. And then you see him selling souvenirs. You know, the title of the film is Paris Souvenir, which is Paris Memories, but technically it's souvenirs of Paris, souvenir memories, memories, as if in a souvenir. And all she does is walk with him and talk to him. And there's a sense of satisfaction for all of us as well as for her. And that she has found him. She's come out of this existential morass that this film has put her into to find meaning, to survive. That's a moment when she connects with this fellow who reached out to her. So in a sense, humanity is about reaching out, about holding on to each other, to reminding each other of the power of the human touch. And then you get into other more universal themes that we live our lives kind of unconsciously. You know, we go to restaurants, we meet people, we chit chat. Oh, there's a birthday over there, and it's meaningless. It's like watching people trivialize their own existence, not because they're trivial, but because the culture that they live in encourages a certain passivity, a certain social safety net for their lives. A birthday, it's no accident that it's a birthday party that's taking place. Celebration of life that gets blown to bits. So when this accident happens, not an accident, this attack that happens, everything in her life changes. Suddenly, she becomes aware of everything. There's something wrong with her marriage. There's something wrong with that woman who said she was in the toilet. There's something not right that she's got to put back into sync. And she does. So in that sense, she's heroic. But the film reminds you of how precious life is, not to be cornball, but how precious life is and how we need to find meaning and pursue that meaning as a goal of life. It's an incredible film, I think, on every level. For those of you who've been taking any of my classes the last 35 years, you know that I'm big about not cutting, about letting things happen and not because the director tells you where to look, not to direct your emotions. So much of this film happens within the frame where Alice Winokur lets you watch in real time the development of these emotions, these feelings, these needs, these reflections. Virginie Efira actually went to the premiere of this film in New York, and she was there. And she's a very glamorous actress. She's actually in real life very beautiful. She's beautiful here too, but I mean glamorous and just wonderful. She's known everywhere around the world except in America, and that is due to the fact old trade disagreements about having foreign films coming into America. It's another story I'll go into at some point. But for the last 75 years, very difficult for foreign films to get shown in America, except at festivals. Very easy for American films to get shown over their trade imbalances. So going all the way back to World War II. Another time I'll go into, tell you why that is so important. But for now, it's crucial to understand that the rest of the world sees this film. Everyone in it is a big name. This is a star-studded production, but it's almost better that you don't know who these people are, that you don't know this world. And by the way, Paris has never looked so great as it does in this film, which is not unintentional. Paris has been disturbed in this film. The beauty of their world has been disturbed. And she keeps on, Winokur, she keeps on reminding you of how beautiful this world is that these people try to destroy. Just one more thing, and then I'll turn it over to my cohort too. This is based on a true incident, the Charlie Hebdo incident. Paris, unfortunately, has been the target of too many terror attacks. It's tragic, and it's hurt the culture of France. But the Charlie Hebdo attack, the one with the newspaper magazine was running, and they came in and killed everybody who because they didn't like a cartoon that they had run. I mean, it's sick, crazy, disgusting things, and that attack, not just an attack on a couple of writers, but an attack on freedom of thinking, freedom of ideas, and that's how this film celebrates that attack by waking her up, till human voices wake us, and puts her on a mission to find meaning. So, I mean, it's no Spider-Man, I give you that, but it's got a meaning all of its own, and it's a tremendous film. It comes from a heritage of French filmmaking where they let things happen within the frame. And for you filmmakers out there, the lesson here is a couple of lessons. Look at modern international films so you don't get seduced by the Hollywood myth. Secondly, be economical. You don't need to tell everything verbally. You need someone of Virginie Efira's caliber who can show you what is happening through her posture, through the looks that she has, the reactions. As Truffaut said, reality in films is not the action, it's the reaction to action. So true. It is one of the great observances of Truffaut. So wonderful film. There are about 10 of her films, Virginie Efira, that I've been showing at a museum where I curate. And it just opens up the world of what filmmaking is. She was 45 when she made this film. And, in Hollywood, you're finished at 45. You're gone. It's a 20-year-old medium. In France, she's at her peak. And just a wonderful woman. So basically, that's what I have to say. Questions, or you guys want to say something?
Yeah, like I will ask you how the movement of the camera. I know that in your classes and your dialogues in other faculties, we have been discussing about how the camera moves, how you go, and it's interesting that they have a Monet in the film, right? And you don't you go and observe the Monet, and you're like the painting, and you're like, okay, this is beautiful. Uh, and in film, like I noticed there are a lot of close-ups, right, in this film, and it has like heavy emotion. Like, how do you think it's important movement for those close-ups?
Well, movement. If you think of the world as the screen is a world of this movie, of any movie that you see. You know, over the weekend, one of your TV stations played Citizen Kane, I think 5 times. Um, and not being that fluent in Spanish, which means I know 2 or 3 words, I watched it um, without the dialogue. I turned the sound off, even though it's a sound film. Sound is very important in that film. Yeah, but I wanted to see again how those tricks were done, and they are. It's really an amazing film to watch to see what he was able to accomplish in 1941. Although he gets a lot of credit for that mise en scène, placed within the frame, placed within the scene. Um, Charlie Chaplin did it long before Orson Welles did it, and D.W. Griffith did it long before Orson Welles. But you learn from the best. In this film, the camera is like her other. It's like her companion, and it goes on these journeys with her, and it does a lot of reveals. It will move, and then you will find out why that shot is being made, all meticulously planned. What Winokur is doing is expanding the world of this film by moving the camera. She expands the limits, she expands the borders, the world, so that Virginie can investigate this world, so that she can examine it. It's almost like the camera is in cohorts with her, is in partnership with her, helping her to solve the film. There's that great moment at the end where she sees him, but she's not sure if it's him. Um, and she won't know until she touches his hand. But she looks at him, and all she does is this. This is what she does. It's all she does, pointing. And then we see him, and he nods. No dialogue. Are you the guy who? None of that. This is filmmaking at a supremely beautiful cinematic level. You don't need to intellectualize this film because if you start talking about plot, the what of the film, it's very simple. A woman goes to a cafe, gets involved in a terror attack, survives, and tries to put the pieces of her life back together. Okay, that's this and 7 million other films. What makes this film so powerful is not the what, it's the how. How this story is told to you by Alice Winokur. That's a master's touch, being able to tell you this story without having you read it, without having you intellectualize it. That will not work in this film. It'll work in some films, for sure, but not in this film. In this film, unlike what Hitchcock would do, say, he would tell you the end of the film in the beginning, as he always does, and then you watch as things figure themselves out. Like in Vertigo, when Kim Novak writes that note. In case you haven't gotten it by then, she tells you what the story is, so you can watch it from a kind of a privileged point of view and understand there's something going on here beyond what we think is going on. We should show that film, by the way. I'd like to talk about Vertigo with you at some point. Anyway, here she does the opposite. She keeps you completely behind this film. Instead of being ahead of you, she stays behind you. So you, as in Lolita the other night, he was ahead of us. Here, she stays behind, so that we go through a sense of trauma, a cinematic trauma, not a real trauma, and resolution of that trauma by discovery. And really, that's what life is. Life is a series, as those great poets, the Beatles, said, of hellos and goodbyes. You know, and this is a film where you have goodbyes and hellos. And so she is, at the end, those two fingers, again, parts of the hand, those two fingers. And then they get together and they walk like civilized human beings, survivors. Beautiful, beautiful film dedicated to somebody who died in a terrorist attack.
Now, I think one of the most interesting aspects about this movie is the fact that we have multiple perspectives. And also, I think the use of an unreliable narrator, because we are piecing together the story and we are following her through this journey. So I just would like to know, what is your opinion on the use of these multiple perspectives and how well it is achieved?
My first question is, unless I've missed something, there is no narration in this film. This is a film where you don't hear someone say, "Let me tell you a story about the day that I was in a cafe." That's that's less cinematic than having you discover as you go along without an explanation. You know, we've been watching documentaries in the doc class. There are no narrations. You don't need a narration. A narration is something you do when you put your child to sleep. And then the bear said, and to the mama bear, you don't need that in film. You can have it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have, but you don't need it. As far as the multiple points of view, give me an example, because to me, this is a very unified film. This is all basically her story. I don't know who else's story it is. The fellow with the leg, and the wife, the girlfriend or the wife comes out and says to him, "This is astonishing. He's yours now. He's more yours than mine." I mean, wow, where does that come from? I mean, that to me is one of the mysteries of this film. You know, she walks in, she sees the two of them there, and you know, a little jealousy pops up. And what's she doing in his hospital? You know, and yeah, it's a reasonable reaction, but very quickly she understands that the experience that they've shared is something she will never be a part of, like Virginie's husband, like the child, like the men sweeping up the memorial. Um, she has more in common with the people on the train, which is an unreal scene, than any other perspective. So I'm not sure that there are multiple perspectives in this film. I think it's a very unified film, especially since you don't see the terrorists and you don't have all of that to deal with. Uh, you know, we're going to get them, as I said before. You know, that disappears from the film. It's the reaction to it that we care about. You know, we have survived it as much as they have. And so we are in a kind of a privileged position of understanding what they've all gone through because we've seen it. We've seen it. And we haven't read about it. We've seen it. And that's cinema. That's what film is. To be able to take the tools of film and move you without saying, "I'm going to move you." To be able to have that facility. And she's got it. She's got it. So that would be my answer. Question?
Yeah, like regarding that idea, I found interesting that we start with the attack, and you said it a while ago, that we start with the attack, and also the the people with the guns, that they don't show us. Like the director, she only, the shots are from down to top, right? And we don't see the faces, we only see like a little bit of chaos, and then it's only the reconstruction of what happened.
Yeah, because in life, if you've ever been in a car accident or something, it goes by just like that. You're not sitting there observing every moment of an attack and saying, "Oh, that guy's crossing over there, and that's a 45 caliber." No, that's how it happens. It's startling because no one is prepared for it, and so that's one of the reasons that she needs to put those pieces back together again. That she needs to become whole. And that's the purpose of the attack. Well, there was no purpose to the attack, but dramatically, it opens this journey for her of self redemption. Not that she caused anything, but the redemption of her soul, the redemption of her being, the redemption of her meaning is what she is searching for. And that's a pretty good detective story. I mean, that's better than Law and Order. I mean, where these characters they're all the same. Nobody has any lives. Just they commit a crime. Little dialogue, commercial dialogue, courtroom. What is going on? And it's all you can turn off the screen and listen to those shows. In fact, they're better if you don't watch them or listen to them. But if you don't need to watch them here, you need to see this. You need to see this film. Also, the things, a woman filmmaker, which there are not enough of. In Paris, there are quite a few. The woman who did the film about falling out the window this year, the woman director, and a very good one. Virginie Efira is such a modern character, riding around on a motorcycle. She goes without makeup. You don't see her in a dress. She's just a modern thinking woman. But thinking, you have to be able to show that. You can't talk about, oh, she's a real intellectual. You've got to see it. And you see it even in the opening scene when she's in the kitchen, making herself whatever it is, usually a drink in Paris. There's a sense of something missing. When the doctor gets the call, the fake call to go meet his girlfriend, he leaves his pen behind. And I always found that moment so interesting because it's certainly a semiotic symbol. There's no question about that. But it's also, think about it in terms of hands, fingers, the hands that write. So he leaves behind this mechanical substitute for his own hand. And she takes the pen up and she looks at it. It's just beautiful stuff going on. Watch this film again. In fact, let's cancel everything tonight. Let's run it again. She looks at the pen, she looks at the writing on the page, and then you see that blotch of ink, the moment the attack happened. And again, no narrator telling you that. You see it. And then she can't get the ink off of her hand. So the ink is like blood. It's like the blood of the cold blood that is on her hands. Again, this unity of symbolism of the hands. It really runs through the entire film. And the other symbol that runs through the film is what? Anybody have an idea? What is it? The apple? The apple? You mean going back to beginning? Yeah, that's a good observation. But what about the rain? The rain that like yesterday here in Guatemala, this comes out of nowhere. And in the beginning, that music, that wonderful music that she uses, that foreboding, and something is not right here. And then you see the rain coming down in the darkness, almost like a gothic, like Frankenstein or Dracula. But then, after the accident, the rain changes and it becomes a symbol of purification. And watch when it pops up in this film. It's always at a moment where uh, her search seems to stall and she doesn't quite know what to do next, where to go. The rain comes down and kind of cleanses, purifies, tries to wipe away the trauma so she can see more clearly. Rain and water are big symbols in film since day one. But it's not the power of the symbol; it's how you use the power of that symbol. And here you see a master's touch as she walks through that rain, and the glistening on the streets when the rain falls, a symbol of purification, of cleansing, which she needs to do in this film. She's got to cleanse herself of that trauma that happened. Okay.
I would like to say something else. Yeah. I think for me, one of the most interesting scenes in the movie, I think it's a moment where she starts remembering the sounds of when the attack happens, and she's walking down the street, and you can hear the train passing by, and then you can hear also like the brakes from the cars, all of that, and it sort of makes you remember the brakes are sort of like the screams, and then the train are the gunshots. And I think the like you said, this movie is very visual, but I think sound is also a very important thing during this movie.
So, yeah, I totally agree with you. Those are terrific observations. When I say visual, and that you don't need dialogue, they're different from sound. If you look at Citizen Kane, Wells came out of radio, and so Kane is a radio play. There's nothing wrong with that. When sound becomes a problem is when it substitutes for visual cinematic experience as a shortcut, as a sound without uh, what what uh, um, what you need to see. There's nothing wrong with sound. Sound. We have sound movies. I mean, that's what they are. But it's as a director, um, as a tourist critic, you always hear, "Oh, you think directors do everything, but what about the sound? What about the projectionist? What about the costume designer? What about the guy with the rain upstairs?" Yeah, that's all there. That's right. But when you get onto a plane and you have all the engineers putting the pieces of the plane together, and you have these steward people, whatever they call them today, and then you have the fellow putting the gas. But without the pilot, where's the plane going? So a director, certainly you use everything you can, but you have to have somebody with a personal vision. And this is a film that is replete with personal visions. I mean, that's what um, if it weren't Alice's personal vision, this film would have no meaning. It would be a newsreel. The fact that this is not reality, but a representation of reality means yes, sound, yes, rain, yes, the blood. It's all part of the process of taking elements, mining them, polishing them, and then putting them on your bracelet, which is your movie. Um, you use whatever you can use. Most of the time, less lesser directors cannot overcome the technical aspects of a film. They get swallowed by it, and it becomes, great sound, great cinematography, great costumes. Where's the film? That happens so often. Here's a woman who's totally in control of her mise en scène, if I can use that term, and the ambiguity of the mise en scène, again, is a thematic representation in this film. This is not a lesson. This is not banging you over the head. This is letting you find your own float, your own level of flotation, as version A does. So film, it's a shared experience. That's why you make films, not just for yourself, but for yourself. And, you are as a filmmaker, you are a window and a mirror. Those are your functions. You want to look through that window of life and show it, and you also want the audience to see themselves in that reflection. And that is the heart and soul of auteurism. We accept the weaknesses of the criticisms that are hurled at us constantly about film is not a director's medium and all of that nonsense. It is what it is. And when you look at film auteuristically, I believe you reach a more profound level, a more profound experience. And all tourism really is a ranking. It's so that when you study film, you don't go to a gigantic barrel, reach in, pull out a film. Okay, let's look at this. I mean, no, you have Hitchcock, you have Ford, you have Hawks, you have Chaplin, and you organize them. So, what's a good director? Good director is someone who makes good films. What's a bad director? Someone who makes bad films. And that's what we as critical and historical detectives do is to take all the films like Hitchcock, like Ford, like Hawks, all of whom were considered B directors before auteurism. And not me, but the people who came before me, my mentor at Columbia, took all those films and said, you're looking at the wrong place. You're putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable. Those films, that's where the action is. So, it's hard to believe for us today that Hitchcock was considered, master of suspense, whatever that's supposed to mean. Today we look at Hitchcock and it's one of the most profound experiences you'll ever have in film, mostly because of his moral dilemma. So even though you don't see the words moral dilemma on the screen, that's what you are experiencing through the use of a story, So story is important. What is important, but not as important as the how. There's one thing I just want to say about what you said before. You know why the Monet is in the film? You follow that? The postcard. So you have this wonderful moment of this gigantic painting, and this little postcard. And all you see really is her finding the spot, finding the place on the picture. And then the camera stays on her and you watch her disintegrate in emotional filmmaking. You don't hear anybody say, well, that's a big Monet and it was on the postcard. Oh, wait a minute, I think I found the spot. You don't need that. You don't need that if you know how to do it cinematically. And what you just saw today was a masterclass in filmmaking. And you should see a lot more of these films, these modern international films. They open up like in The Wizard of Oz. You're in a black and white world. Suddenly you open up this door and this whole world there waiting for you. And so I'm glad at least that we can see this and get an idea of what filmmaking can be today, modern filmmaking, writing and directing by a woman. Any other questions? Just met a girl named Maria.
You were talking about sound recently, and there's a moment, and you also mentioned Oppenheimer in our class last week, and then there's a moment where everything is silent and there is no music, no sound, nothing. And in this movie as well, there's a moment that everything is silence, no music, nothing. So I wanted to ask for your opinion on those silent parts and do they put them there? What's like the necessity or the message they want to transmit when there's silence?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that you remembered something from the class that I mentioned last week.
Of course.
Children. My mother was worried that I would have no meaning in life. But if she was alive today, she would be very happy. It's like in music, in classical music, you come to a crescendo and then you wait, and then you hit the cymbals. Sound is important, and the absence of sound in a film, which has such a rich oral texture here, not dialogue, but a rich oral texture. You take that away for a moment, and then you blast back. So it's not so much a meaning as it is part of the arsenal of a director to be able to say, all right, here, let's keep it completely silent and then bring it on. I think it's silence in Oppenheimer before the bomb goes off. Maybe one day I'll show that and I'll show everybody why it's one of the worst films I've ever seen. Okay, this young lady, what's your name? Lou? Okay, easy. Remember, Lou.
Thank you. Again, with the topic of sound and dialogue and silence, I wanted to know, how do you feel about this sequence where we are seeing the victims that are writing on the blog, and we see them like kind of like reading out loud what they wrote, and how does it impact? Because I agree that the film is all about the main character. So how does this scene and sequence impact the rest of the journey of the character? Because to me, I feel like it's important, but I just can't really figure it out why.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't worry about figuring it out intellectually.
Right.
That's for your English class. But for your film class, she has joined a very selective society, survivors. And so whenever she sees them, there's that incredible scene where that woman thinks she was hiding in the bathroom and, indicts her, blames her. And, if you watch it again, you'll see Virginie literally jump back, just jump back from the force of that accusation. So again, it's part of the technique and the tools that you have. She wants to give you a little bit of who these people were. We find out more about the birthday boy because of his leg, but there's the waitress who was there. There's the bartender who kind of, he's sick of it. He's like those garbage men picking, getting rid of this stuff. Look at our beautiful statue ruined by these flowers. So there are a lot of people in the film who are scattered, like you drop into a lake and the circles go out. And, she's just trying to put it together. There is a richness to the elements that are used in this film. There's a richness to it where it would be very difficult to replicate as a novel. Because in a novel, once you start writing about those characters in that way, then the through line, the action, the interior life of Virginie goes off track, and you get lost. You get caught up in words. Words are important. I use words to make a living. I'm not saying they're not important, but in film, words alone won't do it. That's why the stage is an oral medium. You never hear about directors on the stage. You hear about playwrights. Albee, Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, all these great, Cervantes, all these, these great playwrights. Cervantes, the novelist, not Cervantes, the guy who did the Nobles Cyrano. The theater is oral. You go to the theater to hear Shakespeare, to hear wonderful dialogue, to see a performance go all the way through. Film is not that. Film is not oral. Film is visual. And oral kind of tags along to make the film realistic. But the power of this film It was all in her face, all in her journey inside that we have the privileged position of seeing and of watching and being affected emotionally. So it's not a silent film. You don't eliminate words, but words are in service to the cinematic aspects. The cinema is not in service of dialogue, um, in my opinion. Anybody else? You were from that class the other day, right? Yeah, the musician. Yeah, this fellow. What's your name? Samaki?
Sebastian. How about that? We've been discussing about sound and the absence of sound in this movie, but there's a moment in the film that she tries to cross the street and she almost gets like run over, and it's kind of like a jump scare. But what do you think is like the function of this resource in films like these jump scares?
The jump shot?
Uh,
The-
like the moment where she almost gets like run over is like a
Well, there's a little bit of foreboding there, and it symbolizes people don't live in a vacuum, and so when she almost gets hit by the car and she jumps back and is surprised, that's basically what happens in the cafe with the attack. This director is so smart that she is constantly setting you up um, with a very, very easy and obvious technique. Remember when she's sitting in the cafe, excuse me, with her husband, and suddenly there's a bang on the window, and everybody jumps, and you see the bang, and you say, "That's just some kid." And then the real bang. So you get set up that way. It's not. It's nothing. And you see that in every horror film ever made. It's nothing. It's just a cat going. And then so, I mean, it's a technique. Set you up, and it gives you a false sense of security. Nothing. And then, boom. So, filming, and that's what it's called.
Thank you.
Anybody else? This young. What's your name? Your name? Nicole. Nicole. Okay.
So I wanted to ask, because for me it was a very impactful moment when the girl finds the picture of that she was searching in the postcard. I think that, like, I don't know your opinion, that all the characters are based or are like are based on the protagonist, saying that they're all a reflection of her. The child finding the exact like the exact frame is like is just before she finds I don't remember the guy's name, but it's like that, meaning, do you believe that they're a reflection, or they're like they because they suffered the same tragedy, do you believe that they just came up and end up in the same situation?
That's a great observation. You made a very good point that that what the young girl goes through is exactly what she goes through. This needing to find that corner of the painting that matches. It's a very good observation. That is part of what makes the film work. You're already set up. You've already gone through that emotional reconciliation of sorts, and then you see it again with her. That's good. You have a question.
Ines.
Elaine?
Ines.
Ines?
Yeah, Ines. I was also wondering what you thought about something that I noticed is somehow like the victims of the attacks, kind of like what that brings is isolation in some way, and they're all isolated, but that is ultimately what brings so much connection, right? And so much intimacy between all of them, right? And at the very end of the movie, when she finds Hassan and they meet and they hold hands, and she says like, he's alive, right? And I'm alive too. And I was wondering, what you thought about the ending, because the ending is very beautiful, but at the same time, it kind of feels really abrupt. Like, hold hands, we found each other, yay, and it ends, right?
Well, I wouldn't say yay.
Yeah.
What's nice about it for me is that it is just that it isn't a big reconciliation and they run toward each other in the rain and they swoop each other up. Yeah, we've seen that enough times. What's nice is the intimacy that they have when they connect. Their intimacy is so beautiful that you don't need to hear all of that. You just need to see them walk and say those last lines. That's really all you need. I think, especially after all she's gone through, and searching for him. There's another aspect about him that's so fascinating, is that she goes into a kind of a different world to find him. You know, it takes her out of that upper middle class, nouveau riche, husband's a doctor, all of that, at one of the most famous cafes in Paris, where she's just idling away, you know, all of them. They're all just kind of not working. I mean, you know, and then in order to complete her search, she goes into this other world, this fringe of Paris, the Senegalese neighborhood. And she's able to connect with that woman, the wife. She's able to reach her. And that, I think, is one of the most beautiful things in this film, is that it doesn't become a racist thing or a class issue. It becomes someone who is able to cross into that world and find help and find help. So that unity of humankind is one of the most powerful things in the film. You know, a nice moment that talked about the end of the film. He's selling souvenirs. You know, this really, he's evading the law. He's an illegal immigrant. The police come, and you see this every day in New York. These guys, looks like Baghdad in New York City. They have all the handbags and all that stuff. And then the police are coming, and they wrap everything up in a sheet, and they run off to the next place. You have a little bit of that here. He's not a glamorous figure. He's not somebody who is holding the key to the universe for her. He's the opposite of that. He's somebody that she needs to connect with because he took her hand. So his inherent humanity makes him a prince. He's a prince in this film. And he's like, she's like Cinderella in this film, looking for that glass slipper. You see, stories are repeated over and over again in films. Because they work. What if she didn't find him at the end of this film? You know, what are we going to do? We're going to go out and kill somebody, you know? So there are certain things you have to do. And that's why I say that how supersedes the what, because we know what the what is. You know, in every love story, boy meets girl, they break up. If they don't get back together again, you know, there'll be a riot in the theater and no one will go see the film. So those conventions are there. It's what you do with them, how you personalize them. At the same time, making them universal. That's the rabbit coming out of the hat. That's what that is. That's the trick, the illusion that you can create with something as simple as pulling a rabbit. Okay, well, thank you all for coming.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. So this activity, the Cine Foro, is an event hosted by the School of Film and Visual Arts, where we engage in conversation, as we all did right now, and analysis with our visiting professors. Today we had the honor of having Marc Eliot with us. So we are glad that you were here with us, and we invite you to stay tuned for communications. We'll be sending about upcoming events so you can join us. So thank you. And thank you, Marc.